Going live. Okay, all right,
Right.
cool. Going live. And this is going to be awesome. So we are back now to the real deal, and welcome to everybody on Facebook and those who are joining us. It's great to have everybody here today. This is another bonus. You're probably noticing that this is day 9 of a 7-day challenge. Why did I do that? Because Dr. Dave was not able to be in the 7-day, and he is so phenomenal that I wanted to add a bonus for us, especially since this is New Year's Eve and a big day for people not to be drinking and driving and maybe not drinking at all. So welcome, Dave. Thank you so much for coming. And you are called Dr. Mac by your patients, right?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
So thank you for coming today. And I guess why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to do this challenge with me.
Well, one of the things is, I've been a therapist, a psychotherapist for 30 years now. And, I was really interested in your challenge because there are a number of people that struggle from addiction. And when, you asked me to talk a little bit about being a professional in recovery, and what we do know is that 1 in 10 individuals, professionals, have an alcohol issue, whether it's abuse or dependence. And that I think is really something that is underreported. Most professionals don't want to come forward and admit that there is a problem with a substance, because there are a number of repercussions for doing so that could come into play, from loss of licensure to all the other things that come with addiction, jails, institutions, and death, all those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was hard. It was really hard for me to come out as a counselor myself, to admit that, because we're supposed to know better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little bit about why didn't we know better? Why didn't we get it? Why is it so hard?
I think the biggest thing, speaking from my own experience, was probably ego. I'm given this title. I'm expected to live above what other people are living in terms of my standards, or at least that's what I was taught, or I put upon myself. And I was just not doing that. When we look at that pedestal that sometimes you're put up upon, that's a long way to fall, if you're putting
Right.
yourself up here. And it was just really difficult to admit to myself that I didn't understand how to manage to cope, to figure out what was going on. I teach other people to do that. And here I was, somebody who is struggling, and, I'm telling people to reach out, to make connection. And there I am hiding on a daily basis, and not wanting people to see me, but inside wanting that, but further disconnecting myself from people because of addiction.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? So how did you finally get past that point of, that first step, admitting that you're powerless and that your life has become unmanageable? How did you, what pushed you over the edge, so to speak?
Well, let's just put it this way. I did some experimentation and controlled drinking, and that really didn't work too well for me. And then it just kind of went downhill from there. I was did my residency out in Utah, and I was really focused and driven there because I had some type of purpose and probably something to prove. Like, look, even someone like me who has an addiction issue, look at what I can do. And again, that was partially, not partially, probably all ego driven, because I had these thoughts and feelings that I'm this inadequate person. I'm not enough. And some of that came from trauma, growing up. And it got to the point where I remember driving in my car, Linda, and how the mirror is there. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I would shave in the shower to avoid that contact with my own face. And so I would flip the mirror down and couldn't even look in the mirror. And that wasn't,
wow.
Yeah, I began to realize that wasn't a great way to live. And all the other things that come with addiction, financially, relationship, withdrawing, not, connecting with people, but yet all inside desiring that connection, and a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And so I was sick and tired of that, and decided there's got to be a better way. I knew I would die. I knew it, in the core of my being. And, I didn't want to live like that anymore.
Oh, well, I'm so glad because you are such a blessing to those of us in recovery and in the community, and you've really broken the I guess the bondage people are, and the shame and the guilt and the stigma
Hmm.
of being an alcoholic or having an addiction of whatever kind. You've helped to, not make it so painful and hard
Hmm.
to be able to do that. So really, thank you for doing that. Now, today we happen to be recording this on New Year's Eve, just a few hours from the ball dropping, and people are undoubtedly, I know I would have been, getting ready, getting their stuff together to go out on New Year's Eve. That's part of the reason why I did the 7-day challenge over the holiday, hoping to prevent something from happening. Now, we've both been doing what we're doing as counselors for like 30 years.
Yeah.
How many bad things have you seen happen over the holidays?
I've worked in emergency rooms, I've worked in hospitals, and the repercussions of just even that decision to drive, to have another whatever you're using at that point. I mean, the number of domestic violence things that would come in, I've worked in crisis. I mean, it was just unbelievable to me. And again, a lot of times, if you're already going into the holiday in some type of mood, the substance can further enhance that. So, we saw a lot of things happen in the emergency rooms and in crisis over the holidays. You would just I remember being at one of our local agencies here and handling crisis, and just like grabbing the desk, like, oh my God, here we go. Here we go. And, certainly my life was part of that, at one point when I was using. It was just, a free for all. You didn't know what was going to happen, and it did happen. The bad things happen. And, it's not only about that bad thing that has happened in that moment, it's kind of how it trickles out. So if you think of a tree and the roots of a tree, that one instance, something that happens on that particular night can change your life forever. And change your family. And it's not just about you. I don't think we think, how is this going to impact those people in my life that I love and care about, from work to family to friends?
Yeah, people don't know. My little sister's 10 years younger than me, and I had quit drinking before she was old enough to start, and she felt she had missed something because she didn't get to drink with her big sister. Well, I started drinking again 10 years after I'd been sober. And she said, oh, great, you're drinking now. I'm going to come up for New Year's Eve and let's go out. Well, I had started drinking again. Okay. So we pop the bottle of wine before we go out, the bottle of Asti. We go out, and by 9 o'clock, she's got me in the bathroom like, you're done. I had embarrassed her so bad already by 9 o'clock, dancing on the, table. And this is by 9 o'clock on New Year's Eve. And I've never lived that down, never in all these years. I've been sober almost 27 years now, and it still is there. And the things that happen, and waking up with people you don't know, or waking up having driven home. And Jason Breitenfeld was just one of my speakers this week, and he was hit by a drunk driver while driving a safe ride home vehicle with some other folks, and he was hit. And it's just tragic what it does to you in your family. So I guess, admitting, if there's anybody listening today and they're hearing you, no matter what time of year you're listening, at least plan ahead. Don't get behind the wheel. That's a biggie. But what do you do, Dr. Mack? What I just wrote a little book on, some strategies, and one of them is, how do you get through wine o'clock? How do you deal with a day like today when all your friends are going out, you're going over to your families, and there's going to be alcohol available? How do you deal with that?
That's an interesting question, because tonight I'm going to be in that situation. I'm going to be going to an anniversary party, and there's going to be a lot of alcohol there. And, I'm far enough out where that desire and that craving, I am not knuckling it like in that first 7 days, a lot of people will do. I remember those times. I was at a meeting earlier in the week online, one that I go to, and we have people that come in at various stages of recovery, some that are really new. And it reminds me that, wow, I was there one time. And so I never want to be there again. So tonight I'm thinking in my head, I was talking to a friend of mine, like, I don't want to go. Part of me doesn't want to go. And I'm like, I don't want to see all that alcohol. I don't want to, be around that. But, again, there are certain things that we do for our partners in our life, and we have to go to certain functions. I guess I could say no, but I'm hoping that that's not going to happen. So I'm thinking, what could I do? Well, the place I'm going, I could check to see if there's a meeting in that area. I mean, what's an hour stepping out? An hour. If there's tons of people, it's nothing.
Yes.
I can talk to my partner about, okay, this is getting too much for me. I need to leave, and have an exit strategy. That doesn't mean that that person has to leave. They can stay, and we can work that out. Definitely, look, I don't have it in front of me. I'll give you an example. I have a phone list with a gazillion names on it, and I can pick up that phone. Sometimes it weighs 10,000 pounds if you're not used to doing that. But the greatest thing I have is I have connections with people in my group who really are my lifeline. Like, I've already talked to them about this, and there's a couple that I know I could reach out to if I really need to. And so that's the thing about recovery. To me, addiction drives disconnection, recovery drives connection. And that is something that's really important. And it's almost one of those things where, look, I have friends who know me quite well, and they're going to be able to know if something's up, know if I'm off, and they will address that with me. Before, when I was drinking, I didn't want anyone to see me, hear me, or validate me. I didn't want any of that in my life. And so that's been quite a change for me in terms of allowing people in to really see me. And so I think, as far as New Year's tonight, if you're new into sobriety, you might not want to put yourself into that situation where there's alcohol free flowing, or whatever substance it might be. That's going to be hard. That's going to be really difficult. And so sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish here. Like, I'm putting myself in a position that the potential is very high that I could drink, and you have to ask yourself and play that tape to the end. If you're in that moment and you decide to drink, play the tape to the end. I was there, but the problem is this, we were talking about people hurting their families, going out and driving. Addiction doesn't care. It doesn't care what's at stake.
No.
It will take you down. And, there is somewhere within people that say that's probably not a good idea, at least for me, but I would find myself doing those things. And then the shame and the guilt would set in. And so for me, in recovery, when you stop using the substance, that's great. It's all the other work too that comes with that,
Yes.
that I found to
Absolutely.
be the most difficult for a lot of people.
Well, and that's why you and I do what we do,
Mhm.
is that one of the guys in the meetings, he said, there's only one thing you need to change about yourself and addiction. That's everything.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've realized more than anything is the reason that I drink, use, eat, whatever, comes from how I feel. And how I feel comes from what I think. And that's where you're really an expert, is dealing with the our brains are, we function, everything comes from what's in our head. And there's a lot of dysfunction up there that needs to be undone, both chemically and psychologically. And so doing some of that, things that you do, EMDR and brain spotting, those can be some great tools.
Mhm.
Counseling in general, there's nothing to be ashamed of. I've got a counselor, I've got a sponsor, you've got a counselor probably and a sponsor, nothing to be ashamed of, right? And so what would you suggest for people that need to get over that head thing?
Look, that head thing is that was a difficult thing for me. Genetically, there is anxiety and depression in my family, and that's something that I've had to deal with. And alcohol was a way for me to cope with that. And so, you know, I work with a therapist. I train people to think differently and to change to be able to look at those. For example, I'll give you a negative core belief that I have. I'm inadequate. So what would I do with that in my life? I would overachieve, and even if I did something that was, look, I've done a lot of great things in my life, but it wasn't enough for me.
Yeah.
I had to worry about the next thing because okay, you're praising me now, but you know what? In 10 minutes from now, you're not. So what else can I do? And so that I am inadequate, which is a negative core belief, that began to develop early on in my childhood, and the things that I observed and the things that I saw in my family and how you were rewarded. That was the main thing. And I wanted to be rewarded. So I had to work with the therapist to look at that. So first and foremost, for me, it's identifying those negative core beliefs that we have. Then there's the other part of it where you have to identify these negative cognitive distortions. And I'll give you an example. So this is disqualifying the positive. So say, Linda, you have 4 really good things that happened to you today. You have one bad thing, and it doesn't even have to be huge. You say the whole day is shot. And so we forget about those 4 other things that are positive and only focus on that one. Or say I make a mistake and that negativity within my brain starts going, and it's a spiral show that goes down and down. I could overgeneralize. So I could have something happen, it's bad. Now everything is horrible.
Right.
I look at my friends, my family, my job, and I just overgeneralize to everything that's in my life. And so I had to be able to identify those. And look, the brain is an incredible thing. We store things very deep within our brain, and a lot of people have been through some type of trauma. And so you get in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And what happens is you never really process things through. And so I'll give you an example. So when you're a child and you look to your parents and you look how they're reacting and they get upset and sometimes they don't at certain things. So what happens to the child? You become very hyper vigilant. Well, you read the room. So as an adult, you're walking into a room full of people. It's like, say tonight when I go to this party, I'm going to walk into that room and I'm going to read the entire room and I'm going to be on guard because I need to be prepared, fight, flight, or freeze, because I don't know what people are going to throw at me. And again, this is an example of old Dave and how I would handle it. And so as an adult, we need to change the way those pathways go within the brain. And we know that we can do that. It's called neuroplasticity. And what happens is, since the advancements of science from the 90s on, we can scan brains with different techniques. We could do them and we can look and see what happens. And so we want to teach people how to emotionally regulate. We want to teach them to go from emotional dysregulation to regulation. And how does that happen? It's when both sides of the brain are actively working together. And there are things that you can do for that. Now, let me tell you this. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Okay. So your brain will take information and say, that feels like that experience that I had. So it's going to put it in there, and maybe that experience, it was fight, flight, or freeze. So we need to change the way in which that neural pathway goes and to process through whatever might have happened, and for me, I think about my childhood. I had a pretty good childhood, but there's a lot of things that did happen. There was bullying. There was, some other things that went on that I guess I wasn't even aware of, that were causing some of the issues, and eventually led those negative core beliefs, those negative cognitive distortions, led to me finding alcohol. I think it could have been anything, but that's just what was available when you're 18, 19 years old. You can get that. At least I could. And I used it to calm that storm that was in my brain. So when I stopped drinking, it was like hitting a wall at 100 miles an hour emotionally. And you're laying there and somebody says, and they're telling you, now get up and do something. I couldn't move. I could not emotionally even get through the day. It was hard.
Wow. Wow. This is so helpful to hear how this all works. And this is why people just can't possibly know all this. And
Mhm.
I do the same kind of thing. To me, it's a rotten potato. That one thing that happened, it's like having a rotten potato in a bag of good
Yeah.
potatoes. The good potatoes do not make the rotten potatoes smell better. You got to get rid of the rotten potato. So thank you so much. Oh, this has been so incredibly helpful. And for people who are watching this whenever, wherever, I want you to know why you should actually sign up for this 7-day sobriety challenge. And you can sign up anytime. I mean, anytime, day or night, whatever, because I want to show you what all you have to offer. Boy, I got to get way back to where I was going. We have been doing this for 2 years now. And last year, I had 9 speakers. I had more than that, actually. But we had so many speakers that were phenomenal that I just want you to take a look at who they are. Oh, my goodness. How did I get so far from where I need to be? Yeah, this is just this is an ADD thing. So when we're talking brain things, there are so many brain things that we have to address, literally. So don't worry about that. Don't fear that you're, a weirdo or something, because we all have these issues that we have to deal with. But
And Linda, it's a process. I think recovery is a process. You didn't get there overnight. And again, if you're an addict and you're somebody like me, you want it to work in 20 minutes or less. So when you take a Tylenol, that pill better work in 20 minutes. And somebody said to me, Dave, if there was a pill you could take and it would wipe out all the issues and the problems, would you take it? I looked at them and I said, you're damn right I would. I'm not stupid. But again, it doesn't work like that. And this is what I can leave you with too. You're going to need support. You're going to need people in the arena with you. Brene Brown
right.
talks about in her book, The Man in the Arena, and how, if you want to get in there with somebody and help them, that's great. And for me, those people who are willing to step into that arena with me, those are my people, whether it's people who are in recovery or people who are not. I think you could have both of those individuals in that arena with you.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We need our own people. We need people that get us. And whether you're talking about somebody from, recovery, it could be somebody that understands you and knows where you're coming from and can accept you the way you are, isn't going to judge you, none of that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we have to go with it. So I really would encourage everybody to find that person. Now, there's so many different things. Dave, you've been going online to different places, right? To get to meetings?
Yeah, there are online meetings in the area that, we are fortunate to have a recovery club. I won't mention the specific name, but that's something people can get a hold of you or get a hold of me. There's AA, there's Smart Recovery, there are Native American programs. There's so many different recovery programs out there. And that is the one beauty of COVID. There weren't many meetings online. And I attend a particular meeting, and when COVID hit, I thought, what are we going to do?
Right.
What am I going to do? Like, these people, they're my lifeline, and so a ton of meetings went to Zoom, and it allows people, when somebody says, I can't get to a meeting, do you have a computer? Yeah. I'm like, there's no reason not to get to a meeting. That's on you, because they have meetings 24 hours a day throughout the world. The cool thing is I've gone to meetings in Russia, in Poland, in Israel, Canada. They're everywhere. And so I'm grateful for that. That's something that really helped me. So they are out there. You can find them.
That's awesome. Well, I finally got to my right screen here. Had to sign out of one thing, get into another. But so for those who don't remember who we're talking to, this is Dr. David MacIntyre. And this is the 7-day sobriety challenge. We want you to not ruin another holiday or another day by overindulging, even if it's food. I just wrote a new guide on how to stay sober. It's my 7 keys to sobriety that saved my life. And if you notice, Dave, on page 7 here, play it to the end.
Yeah.
Dr. Mack talked about that, how important that is. There's ways of overcoming this. And this is a little guide that you'll get. You have to sign up though, 7daysobrietychallenge.com. You will automatically, immediately get the 9 speakers from the 2021 as soon as you go there. And then we had 10 speakers this year. I'm going to be sharing something that I'm offering tomorrow. So I will be our last speaker for this year, but some amazing speakers, and you can learn all about them. I wrote my journey in a book, in a meditation book, and I just shared my 365 days of asking God life's toughest questions. And I wrote it down, and then I listened and I wrote down what I heard God saying to me. And I just dropped the price of that for my Kindle book down to 99 cents. They won't let us do it any lower than that in the one program I'm in. So hopefully you can afford 99 cents. If you bought a drink, you could afford to go buy my regular book. But Dr. Mack has offered generously to have you email him if you've got any questions at all, or if you're looking to recover and need some direction. This is his email, drmack6380@gmail.com. And we would love for you to continue to stay in contact with us. All you need to do is go to the 7daysobrietychallenge.com. And the bonus that I'm offering is that if you have taken the 7-day challenge, and if you are hanging by the thread like I was after 7 days, I want you to join me for 12 weeks, because this does not happen overnight. 7 days is not going to keep you sober the rest of your life unless you have more support. So for 12 weeks, I'm going to help you through that. I'll connect you up with other people. We've got tons of support, daily and weekly meetings, individual coaching. So I would love for you to join me. You can find out more about it by listening to me tomorrow, and also joining the 7daysobrietychallenge.com, and we'll be doing that. So I want to thank you so much for joining me again, Dr. Mack. It just means the world to me that you've taken your time out of New Year's Eve day to come and share with us, and you've got so much to offer. So thanks to all of the people that came and joined us and are continuing to, and hopefully we'll both be able to help. Oh, even one person has been changed by this. It's been worth our time. So God bless you and thank you. Be safe.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay. Okay. Ending meeting.